What is up, everybody? Coach Juma here, head nutrition coach and trainer at StoopidFit, and today we are going to be breaking down supersets. Really fun topic, something that a lot of people try to incorporate into their program, but unfortunately they aren't incorporating it intelligently enough. So we're going to go through when you shouldn't be using supersets, the proper superset pairings that you should try to have in your program, and the benefits of it for the different types of goals that you might have for your fitness journey. So to start things off, we're going to define what a superset is, and to put it very simply, it's two different workouts being done back to back with minimal rest. So as opposed to a single set of an exercise, let's say a bench press, you do a single set, you take a break. This is when you pair that bench press with another exercise. Let's say a bench press with a dumbbell row, and you do that with minimal break in between. The only break you have is going from putting the barbell down at the bench press to picking up the dumbbells to do the dumbbell row. And after doing both of those exercises, you take the longer break before repeating that superset once again. Now, most people will turn to supersets as a way to burn extra calories, as a way to get more done in the gym, because they think doing more is better. It's going to help them get to their goal faster, but that's not always the case. You don't want to just do more for the sake of doing more. You want to do more intelligently. You want to move with purpose in the gym and have it actually be productive to your goals. A good example of wasted supersets versus smart supersets is, imagine you were driving to work. You have a path that you follow, a series of streets and turns that you take. You don't just take random turns just because they're cool looking turns, right? You don't just give yourself more distance to drive just because you can, right? And it's the same thing in the gym. You don't do just random stuff just because you can do that. You want to do it the smart way. You want your efforts to be fruitful and be productive and efficient to reaching your goal. So when are supersets best to use and who should be incorporating them? This answer is very individual. Not everyone likes supersets. Some people, depending on their personality, enjoy doing one exercise, focusing entirely on that one exercise, and then moving on to the next exercise. And that's perfectly fine. You don't have to do supersets at any one time. You can get just as much great results from doing single set exercises and not supersetting anything. But some people, like me in particular, enjoy doing supersets, going back to back and just moving from one thing to the next and challenging themselves. That's something I really enjoy doing, so I incorporate lots of supersets in the gym. I also usually work out on a time crunch. I work out in the morning for 60 minutes. I want to get my entire workout done in that 60 minutes. So using supersets is an effective use of my time to get all the exercise I need to have a fully effective workout without it taking too much time in my day. So these are the two lifestyle / preferential things that you would look for to justify incorporating supersets. If you don't like it, and if you don't want to feel rushed while working out, maybe supersets aren't for you, and that's perfectly fine. Now, how can supersets be helpful for your goal? If your goal is hypertrophy, which is muscle building, you can get a lot of benefit from supersets if you're using the antagonistic superset model, which we'll get into in a little bit. There have been numerous studies done that stretching a muscle in between sets will lead to greater hypertrophy gains of that muscle. If you do an exercise that puts it in the concentric position and then you superset it with an exercise that stretches that muscle immediately after, you're improving your hypertrophy results in doing so. Another way that supersets are going to be helpful for hypertrophy is by increasing the mechanical tension and training to failure that muscle experiences by working with a compound to isolation movement. You can switch from an exercise that uses multiple muscle groups with a greater focus on one to one that isolates the chest muscle and take that to failure, create more mechanical tension in that muscle, increase metabolite buildup in that muscle as well, and ultimately, if you're able to recover from that, get greater hypertrophy gains in the long run. Now, these same benefits that come from hypertrophy are relevant in fat loss and maintaining your muscle as well. So this can be a good way to be in a calorie deficit without it reducing your muscle tissue, making sure that all the gains you lose are from fat. That's one pro of using supersets for fat loss. Another one is going to be the fact that doing supersets are going to elevate your heart rate for longer periods of time. Obviously, if you do one exercise and it takes you 30 seconds to complete that exercise versus doing two back-to-back exercises and it takes you a minute and a half, you're going to maintain a higher heart rate, burn more calories cardiovascularly by doing that, and all in all, create a better environment to elicit fat loss. And now the last big pro when it comes to supersets that is really underrated is the improvement in your posture and your joint health. When you do supersets properly, you are putting a lot less tension on your joints from moving in one movement pattern repeatedly over and over and over again. One easy example of this is doing a bicep tricep superset. Again, this is an example of an antagonistic superset that I mentioned earlier, where you're training opposite muscles, opposite movement patterns. If you do your biceps first, you're putting a lot of pressure on your elbow as it curls and flexes. If you're repeatedly doing this over and over again and you train biceps more than you train triceps, you're gonna end up getting tendonitis in some cases in the elbow area, and you'll feel a lot of burning pain around your elbow because of the excessive movement with that singular movement pattern. Whereas if you balance it out, you do some curls, some extensions, some elbow flexions, some tricep extensions that also extend your elbow. You're taking tension off of your elbow in the position where you are curling and putting tension on the opposite side and allowing that ligament slash tendon to stretch out. And now, because you're balancing it and giving it time to stretch and rest, as opposed to always being contracted, always being inflamed, you're allowing your joints to get a break and move better and more effectively and reduce the pain that you might experience in that joint. So if you're somebody that experiences constant tendon inflammation, constant tendonitis, that kind of thing, you can benefit from supersets by managing the load and managing the movement patterns and joint flexions and extensions that you might be experiencing depending on the type of movement that you're doing. So we talked about all the different reasons that supersetting can be beneficial for your goal, but in a lot of instances, some people shouldn't be supersetting. The type of people that should limit their supersetting are going to be people that shouldn't have an elevated heart rate for a long period of time, whether that's for a health condition or because of some other reason. People that struggle with recovering from supersetting due to the increased volume and intensity as a result of it. As I mentioned earlier, you don't want to do and commit to supersets if you're constantly sore and finding it hard to recover from training because of adding the supersets. If your body can't keep up with it, don't be doing it, because again, doing more in the gym isn't always the answer. And if your body can't recover from the training, you're not going to get the results that you want. This could be something that we could talk about more in depth in another video, but to keep it simple, you train to earn the right to recover. While you're training is not where you're losing fat or building muscle. It's the opposite. Your training time is when you're breaking down muscle tissue and storing fat. So if you continue to put yourself in this catabolic state, as we like to call it in the fitness world, where you're breaking down the muscle tissue and storing fat, you'll never be able to be in that anabolic state, the rest and digest state, the recovery state that is burning fat and rebuilding muscle tissue. That's another reason for maybe why you shouldn't do supersets. And lastly, if you just don't prefer it, you don't like how it feels, you don't like being rushed, as I mentioned earlier, going from one to the other, it's just not your preferential way of training, then don't do it. No one's forcing you to do it. You can still, again, like I said, get all the benefits of training, losing fat, building muscle without needing to do supersets. Oh, and lastly, if your goal is going to be strength or performance focused, where you're working on your peak strength, getting your number as high as possible, if you're a power lifter, Olympic lifter, you're not going to benefit from supersets. It's actually going to be more damaging to you to do supersets because you need that longer rest period between sets to optimally improve physically, muscularly, neurologically in your lifts. Let's get into how to design and build a proper superset and program it into your training program. So one of my favorites, as I mentioned earlier, is the antagonistic superset pairing. So to put it simply, you're going to be choosing a superset that is working opposite muscle groups or opposite movement patterns. A really easy one to think about is front squats versus barbell RDLs. This is going to be a great lower body pairing because you're going to be training the quads with the front squats first and foremost, and then going into the hamstring slash glutes with the RDLs. With the barbell front squats, it's a knee dominant movement, and you're training the quads through a peak contraction movement because you're focusing on knee flexion. While you're training the quads here, the hamstrings and glutes are going to be stretching as well. They're going to be through a greater stretch in this movement. You go right into a barbell RDL. Now this is going to be focusing on the contraction of the glutes and hamstrings and stretching the quads. While one muscle is contracting, the other one is stretching, and you go from a knee dominant movement to a hip dominant movement. Lots of benefit here for your hip and knee health, for building muscle in both of those movements because you're stretching it after contracting it. It gets a really great pump in your legs as well. An upper body example of this would be an incline dumbbell press with a chest supported row. Here you're doing a upper body pushing movement and supersetting it with an upper body pulling movement, which is going to be really helpful again for your shoulder health as well as the muscle development of your chest and your back. So antagonistics are fun to pair, and you could do this with the bigger muscle groups and the smaller muscle groups alike. Bicep curls and tricep extensions is another one that you can do, but you're really just looking for muscles that are on opposite sides of your body. Chest is on the front, back is on the back, quads are on the front, hamstrings are on the back, biceps are on this side of your arm, triceps on this side of your arm, and they're training opposite movement patterns, which is just the natural consequence of using those muscles. So that's going to be how you train antagonistic supersets. The next type of superset that is going to be really helpful is the compound movement paired with the isolation exercise. So this is where you go from an exercise that trains multiple muscle groups at one time and then pair it with one that isolates a singular muscle in that muscle group, usually the dominant muscle of that muscle group. So if we were to use an example for an upper body and a lower body, doing a dumbbell bench press where you're using mostly your chest, but your shoulders and triceps are also involved, and then going into an isolation exercise of cable flies, now you're really isolating the chest, getting a lot more blood flow into that, creating a lot more metabolite buildup as well, and really challenging your muscle to reach mechanical failure, which is super beneficial when we're trying to go through a hypertrophy phase. A lower body example for this would be going from a barbell RDL, which is going to be glutes and hamstrings and lower back working together, as well as your core, into seated leg curls, which is going to be completely isolating the hamstrings to work through their peak contraction point. Both of these are ways to create more muscular fatigue, more muscular tension in those muscles. So you don't want to do this excessively. You don't want to do this with every single exercise. You don't want to do this with every single workout, but maybe 1 to 3 supersets like this a week would be pretty good for someone, again, in a hypertrophy phase and maybe in a fat loss phase as well, depending on their experience. This one isn't always as joint friendly, so I would be careful with overdoing this one. For instance, with the bench and fly example, that can create a lot of excess pressure on your shoulders and create an impingement or inflammation in your shoulders, in most cases shoulder pain, if done too much. So you want to balance this out accordingly. Avoid doing this excessively. The next one is going to be a synergistic superset pairing, and this is where you pair your compound exercise, which trains a lot of muscles. Instead of focusing on the larger muscle group and isolating it, you focus on the smaller muscle group and isolating it. So going back to the dumbbell bench press example, as I mentioned before, dumbbell bench press is training your chest, shoulders, and triceps at the same time. Instead of going and isolating your chest, now you're going to go and isolate your triceps. This one I'm not as big a fan of, but it can be impactful as well. Your triceps can start dominating your bench press when you go back to it, as opposed to focusing on your chest with that. Because it's going to be so stimulated, you might subconsciously opt for that, which isn't always the best thing, but you can use this sparingly as a way to finish off the workout and really get that blood flow and get a strong pump to, you know, feel like you got a good workout. A part of the benefit of supersetting is just feeling good with doing it. So if that's something that you enjoy and look forward to, great way to end the workout and leave the gym feeling like you did a good workout. Definitely recommend the first two more than this one, but this is also a smart way to superset. And the last type of superset is really just for people that train full body. You can do opposing muscle groups across your full body workout. So what this looks like is doing a upper body push with a lower body pull. Dumbbell bench press, upper body push with barbell RDL, lower body pull. It's training antagonistic muscle groups across the full body spectrum. They're not directly antagonistic, but also a really good way to improve posture, help with your joints, and overall body control and core function. So I hope you found this helpful, and now you're able to design smart supersets in your training program to help you get closer to your goal and spend your time in the gym more effectively without needing to overwork yourself for the sake of getting tired. If you found this helpful, make sure to share it with a friend, comment, and subscribe as well. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those questions. And as always, make sure to stay stupid.